Assalamu alaikum, my dear students. This is Shaila Akhtar, Assistant Professor English. This class is prepared for the students of Honours 4th year, and the topic of our today's discussion is Poems of Walt Whitman from the course American Poetry. My dear students, let's get introduced to Walt Whitman. He was an American poet, essayist, and journalist. He was a humanist and was a part of the transition between transcendentalism and realism. Whitman is among the most influential poets in the American canon, often called the father of free verse. And he was born to the parents named Walter and Louisa Van Velser Whitman, and he was the second of 9 children. He was immediately nicknamed Walt to distinguish him from his father. Walter Whitman surnamed 3 of his 7 sons after American leaders Andrew Jackson, George Washington, and Thomas Jefferson. The oldest was named Jesse, and another boy died unnamed at the age of 6 months. The couple's sixth son, the youngest, was named Edward. Okay, now let's know some more information about Walt Whitman's life and works. Walt Whitman was born in West Hills, Long Island, New York on May 31, 1819, and he spent his early childhood on a little farm on Long Island, and it was always called by its American Indian name Paumanok. And then the family moved to Brooklyn, and he had his schooling from 1825 to 1830 in Brooklyn. At that time, the boy grew up to love the noise and the crowd of the city streets even more than he loved the sea and the open country. In the city, Whitman received a little education of the common school kind. Then he was by turns office boy, printer, teacher of a district school, carpenter, idler, reporter, and editor of a small newspapers. He was something of a vagabond, not keeping any job longer than it pleased him, nor recognizing any social ties which interfered with what he considered his personal freedom. So, at that time, he made one leisurely journey down the Ohio to New Orleans, and during the time of returning on foot by the way of the Great Lakes and Canada, he was seeing practically the whole of the country as it then was, and making comrades of all classes of the laboring people. He came back to Brooklyn and worked at various jobs, wrote newspaper sketches and poems of a very ordinary kind. Then he lived with his mother and paid his board when he had the money. At the age of 36, he published the first small volume, Leaves of Grass, in the year 1855, making a radical departure from all his previous methods of writing. And from that time, he followed an entirely new trail in literature. And this I have mentioned earlier that he was known as the father of free verse among some most influential poets of America. The American Civil War was a major event in Whitman's career. He worked as a volunteer in hospitals, and Abraham Lincoln's assassination in 1865 deeply moved him, and several poems bear testimony to his intense grief. In 1865, Whitman was fired from his post in the Department of the Interior in Washington because of the alleged indecency of the poem Leaves of Grass. He was hired by the Attorney General's office and remained there until 1873. At that time, he had to suffer a mild paralytic attack which left him a semi-invalid. In Whitman's last years, he was mostly confined to his room in the house which he had bought in Camden, New Jersey. And these later years, though troubled by pain and poverty, there was not without their triumph. Though the public would not read his verses, a few good critics acknowledged his power, and his little house became the object of pilgrimages from all parts of America and England. With all his comradeship and love of crowds, Whitman was always secretive about himself, and he has the habit of posing in his poetry. The biographer is often baffled in his search for truth. Towards the end of life, we have the testimony of many who visited Whitman, and almost without exception, these speak of him as one who had learnt the discipline of living, who met suffering with patient heroism, and who left upon all his friends the impression of gentleness and sincerity. And this man died on 26 March 1892, and the most important thing what we cannot overlook, that is, his funeral was a public event. My dear students, now let's talk about the principal works of Walt Whitman. Firstly, the poems, and we have to mention the name of Leaves of Grass because it was published several times. For the first time, it was published in 1855, then 1856, and then 1860, then 1867, then 1871, again in 1876, and again in 1881 to 1882, 1888, and again 1891 to 1892. Then comes the poem Drum Taps, that was published in 1865. Passage to India was published in 1871. After All, Not to Create Only was published in 1871. As a Strong Bird on Pinions Free was published in 1872. Two Rivulets was published in 1876, and November Boughs was published in 1888. Goodbye My Fancy was published in 1891. Then comes Essays and Notes and Studies, and the names are Democratic Vistas was published in 1871. Memoranda During the War was published in 1875 to 1876. Specimen Days and Collect 1882 to 1883. Complete Prose Works 1882. An American Primer 1904. Letters and Journals. Calamus, edited by Richard M. Bach in 1897. The Wound Dresser was edited by Richard M. Bach in 1898. Letters written by Walt Whitman to his mother 1866 to 1872, and it was edited by Thomas B. Harnett in 1902. Walt Whitman's Diary in Canada was edited by William S. Kennedy in 1904. The Letters of Anne Gilchrist and Walt Whitman was edited by Thomas B. Harnett in 1918. We only know one name of a novel, that is Franklin Evans. It was published in 1842, and the collection of short stories was named as The Heartbreed and Other Stories, which was published in 1927. Okay, my dear students, now let's know how the age or the time of Whitman influenced him. The age of Whitman was actually an age of scientific advancements, and the time or age provoked Whitman to be the poet of mankind. So let's discuss how the age influenced Whitman. If we want to consider scientific advancements, we can say there was a rapid expansion of the nation with new states and territories during the time of Walt Whitman, and the idea which was predominant in the air was to achieve material prosperity. So it was a time of material prosperity, and it was a period of unrest, struggle and compromise. So the current was the slave problem, and some of the elite of the society felt slavery an absolute necessity, but many were against slavery and they regarded slavery as a moral evil. So this became a bone of contention between the South and the North, and the entire nation was in turmoil. So its unity was shaken, and the state needed a strong person, and there we can have Whitman's captain Abraham Lincoln in his poems. So naturally the literature of this period reflects the pulse of the times. It mirrors the recovery and the reconstruction of the nation and the progress of the union and democracy. Passage to India shows scientific achievements. A Passage to India proves the advancement in scientific progress, and this progress would automatically lead to material prosperity. The poem was occasioned by three events of the greatest international importance: the completion of the Suez Canal connecting Europe and Asia by water, the finishing of the Northern Pacific Railroad spanning the North American continent, and the laying of the cable across the Pacific Ocean, and thus joining the canal, rail and the cable Europe, North America and Asia. So, Passage to India describes the joining of Europe, North America and Asia by canal, rail and cable. And in celebrating these achievements, he mirrored the times he lived in. That means the age of Walt Whitman. And Whitman, being an optimist, tried his best to free America from melancholy, and he wanted the nation to become conscious of its position in the world. Now, let's see how the American scene influenced Walt Whitman and his writings. That means let's know about Whitman's entrance on the American scene. Transcendentalism came to America by various channels, by the works of Coleridge and Carlyle mainly, and by numerous translations of European and especially of Oriental literature. The last name, that means the name of Carlyle, emphasized an ideal view of the world, and their teaching were largely accepted by Emerson and the Transcendentalists. So, for Whitman, the stage was set. That means his poems on nature show the harmony in nature. His work also has a halo of mysticism, and it is a result of the influence of Oriental literature. And Whitman's poems reflect the nation in the making. It shows his admiration towards the leader of the nation. He speaks of mankind in general, and he glories in the soul and the body. And the soul transcends the physical limits. It assumes cosmic dimensions. The poet Walt Whitman becomes a poet of the entire universe when he identifies himself with all animate and inanimate objects in the world. His works expound his acceptance of the supremacy of the divine force, that means the creator, and he neither cross-examines nor questions about God. He accepts God as the supreme power, the excellent mechanic and maintainer of the whole universe. The national spirit is also mirrored in his poems. My dear students, now stream of consciousness, and using stream of consciousness is a technique, is a very popular technique in the 20th century fiction. And Walt Whitman himself said in his preface that an individual confronts the time, and after he trains his sensibility with awareness of self, it would be possible for him to achieve a cosmic vision which relates all time and all space to the individuals. That means sensibility is trained with awareness of self. Through the self, a cosmic vision can be achieved, and the cosmic vision relates all time and all space to the individuals. Whitman pictured his times in the poems in an optimistic manner, and he saw a bright future for his country. He had many admirers, and he shaped his country through his work, but unconsciously he had started a new trend in the field of literature. And Whitman was wide awake to his times and aware of the rhythms of modern life. His poems, which picture that life, appeal to everyone. And Whitman was concerned of building up relationship to self, to other selves, to the outside world of nature, and to the periods in time. So Whitman projects the identity of others through a sense of self-identity. Okay, my dear students, now let's know Whitman's concept of the poet and poetry. In the year 1855, preface to the Leaves of Grass was published, and Whitman presented his concept of the poet and the poetry of the future there. According to Whitman, the greatest poet is the most complete lover of the universe, and he draws his materials directly from nature. And the greatest poet is a seer who sees the cosmic plan which unites the past, present, and future in harmonious sequence. No object is trivial or petty for the poet, and because it is his function to find hidden significances and spiritual meaning in the ordinary and physical facts. Science and its practical movements are actually sources of encouragement to the greatest poet. And these views are quite closely linked to the general literary tendencies of his age, and these views which inform his poetry also make him a universal poet and a pioneer of modern poetry. Okay, now let's know the basic themes of the poems of Walt Whitman. The individualism, nationalism, and the democratic impulse is always present there. The main themes we can consider unity, equality, and human dignity, and these are basic themes in Whitman's poetry, and they are related to his concept of self. The I of Whitman's poetry is a fusion of several characters, and through celebrating himself, he actually celebrates all. Now, we can consider another theme, that is glorification of the common man, and it is an inevitable aspect of the cult of individualism, and this glorification of the common man finds ample place in Whitman's poetry. Emerson said, "Trust thyself, reverence thyself," and Whitman declares that everything comes out of the people as you find them. Whitman had faith in the inherent dignity and nobility of the common man, and this is the root and basis of his concept of democracy. He declares or sang of the everyday American, and it may include the carpenter, the mason, or the boatman of America. Now we can consider another theme, that is nationalism and democratic ideal. And nationalism and democratic ideal finds expression in Whitman's poetry, and the poet identifies America with the concept of freedom, and he is always inspired by nationalism, and he is also paying tribute to democratic ideals. And poetry and art, he felt, were expressions of the unhampered life of a free people. And we can consider another theme such as humanitarianism. Humanitarianism and fellow being and sympathy characterize several of Whitman's poems, and these poems shows his democratic ideal. He had sympathy for the entire creation of God, and his use of the word en masse is significant because he identifies himself with humanity at large. Now comes importance of science. Whitman considers science to be of vital importance to the progress of democracy. In Passage to India, he commends scientists for creating a sense of unity in the world, but he did not advocate man's submission to science. Now, quest for the divine. Walt Whitman could not be the traditional mystic. He did not subscribe to the negation and denial enjoyed by traditional mysticism. He believes that the spiritual experience is possible and even desirable without sacrificing the senses. In his later poetry, mysticism in its purer senses are present, and Passage to India celebrates the progress of the human soul conquering the earth. But there is the belief that the soul should seek further. That means the soul should seek God through the universe. So, my dear students, this is all for today. Very soon we will be together with another class. Till then, stay home, stay safe, and let's pray for each other. Thank you.